Hey, Femme. We've got another lovely episode for you today. Another guest that was connected to us through a past guest. So Olivia Haller today. Wait, Haller. Yeah, okay, sorry, I'm gonna edit that part out. Olivia Haller today. She was brought to us from Mikhail Chowdhury. And she is an accomplished writer who I got to have a little solo episode with today. And we talk all about how she started as a playwright over in the DC area. Love another East Coaster, as y'all know. And her work has been performed by a number of theater companies. And she was about to have her play performed right when COVID struck, of course. But she has now moved to LA and she has taken on screenwriting as well. And we talk about her wanting to collaborate and wanting to join like the TV screenwriting world. And now she's working on her first short that she wants to get produced. So she's doing a little bit of dabbling in everything. And I think it's great that it's allowing her to really explore the different facets of writing and, build on everything that she's doing. And her latest play, Loneliness Was a Pandemic, has been performed remotely by at least two different companies during the actual pandemic. So that's pretty cool. And just had a live performance in New York. So I am looking forward to an immersive work that she talks about in this episode as well, that I think is a really cool concept, and you guys will get to hear about it. And, we really just talk about the differences of theater versus screen and the similarities too, and how really in the end it's all about like do what you love, tell the story you want to, and go the route you want to. Learn the rules before you break them, but like do what you want. If you have fun with it and you tell a good story and it's moving and emotional in whatever way, even comedies like they've got to create some kind of feeling, right? So if the audience feels it, they're going to enjoy it too. So I know you guys are going to love this episode with Olivia. Welcome, Olivia. Thank you so much for coming on with us today. How's your morning?
It's good so far. Made my
Good
coffee,
so
so that's the best start.
I know, listeners, we're starting early today, but we're here with another East Coaster. Y'all know we love that. So today we have Olivia, you began as a playwright and now are a screenwriter. Is that correct?
Yes. As I've been working on the transition,
Okay.
I actually started off just in theater. I have a BFA in theater arts. So I have a performance background. And then while I was doing that at Boston University, I also took the playwriting track, and I always loved writing. Like I would write little novels in high school for fun.
Yeah.
So when I was in theater school, I was like, I should just write plays because that's what the people in theater do. So I really liked that. And when after college, I sort of was really interested in new play development and like regional theater, especially being from DC. And so I really wanted I loved like reading scripts, and I got really interested in dramaturgy. So I was working in the literary department of Woolly Mammoth Theater Company for a few years. And I loved that because it was a lot of experience, like reading scripts and just seeing like what like modern playwrights are writing about and what was exciting to people. And so I started like writing more plays, and like I wanted to be a playwright, but I
Mhm.
like didn't really like I didn't have a lot of experience with like the craft of it, to be honest. So I think I had like very good taste, but like not my ability did not match my taste. And so I ended up going like taking more classes, or like I went to the Kenyan Playwrights Conference, and that was like huge for me, just meeting other writers and like seeing what other people were doing. So then the more I stayed in DC, the more I was like, you know what, I think I want to get back into more of that like creative sphere. Like I love like dramaturging other people's shows and like reading scripts, but I like this isn't really how I got into the arts. And so I started like auditioning more for shows and just like working on my own stuff. And so I ended up producing my first play in DC back in like 2017, that was like a straight drama. about my family basically, and my younger brother who has severe autism. So it was a lot of like our family's experience of like being caregivers and coming up against that system of like what happens to adults with mental illness. Um, and then after that, I was kind of like, I accomplished my 5-year goal. Like, what do I do? Oh no! Like then
What's next?
I kind of had a crisis because I just didn't know like what I would do next. And so the more I thought about it and the more I worked, the more I just gravitated towards writing as the thing that I wanted to do the most. And so I sort of focused on that. And as I was sort of like, I wrote another play that had a couple, like it was getting a little traction in DC and got a few readings, and then COVID happened, as it does. And I was sort of I thinking about grad school at the time as well. And it just was this moment in time of like, I don't know what the future of theater is and what can I do with myself. And I always had, I really admired playwrights like Becca Brunstetter or Sheila Callahan, or people that like made their living working in television and like made their big money that way, but then still like produce plays on the side. In writers' rooms, and I was like, that's my dream life. So I kind of like, I wanted to take screenwriting classes in grad school. I saw myself, I just loved the city of LA. So I always saw myself ending up there. So then I just like when I ended up taking the UCLA professionals program course remotely, like while I was still in Virginia during COVID, because and that program like is sort of it could be live or in person, or live or remote. And so they had this program set up to be online like 6 years before COVID happened. So they like had infrastructure in place. It was kind of like grad school light, because it's like I took TV drama writing. And so it's like 3 workshops, you write a spec and 2 pilots, and then coupled with these like online lectures that you do on your own time. So I just got to like learn about the craft and the business and like feel like I was doing something while I was stuck at home and not so sure like what, like having my career crisis. So I just going through that. So then as I did it, the more I was like, I really love this. I think I would love the collaborative nature of a writer's room and like brainstorming with other people. And I think that's where I want to go towards. So I just like October 2020 decided to move during lockdown, and January 2021 it happens. Made it here, over here. So I've just sort of been having a great time. So honestly, since I got here, like I've the creative community here in LA is like, it's hard to describe. Like there is a big creative community in DC. Like there's a huge theater scene. I met a lot of artists, but like I think the difference is that the hustle is not legitimized outside of like New York or LA in a way that it is here. Like in DC, it was sort of very much like, okay, like you're a playwright, that's fun. Like what else do you do? What do you really do? Like what do you do for money? And in LA, it's sort of like, you could be like, oh, I'm, I work at Disney, but I'm like really an opera singer. And they'll be like, oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
It's kind of like the opposite of how it is everywhere else.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, this day job is my day job, but like I am an actor, I am a writer.
Yeah, and like people just get it. And so it did feel like I finally wasn't the weird one when I moved out here. And just like other writers are so great. Like the writing community is just a very supportive, fantastic community, and people want to read each other's stuff. They want to give feedback and like help each other. So, and I had like a good starter kit of friends, like people that had like gone to school with me and then moved out here and started embedding themselves in the community. So I was fortunate to have a lot of people who introduced me to their friends. And I went, when I was still unemployed last summer, I had this big like coffee tour of LA that I was just doing for months. Nice. And yeah, so now like I was focused, I think, for so long on just developing more of a portfolio with my scripts. And now I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, I know filmmakers, like, let's do a short. Like, I just want to collaborate on something, like have a project that I'm really working on. So I think that it's just like, I love being on the journey and just being like, even if I'm like have a goal of where I want to be, just like being able to make friends and being able to work on my own scripts and share that work, like is still very fulfilling in its own way. And so it feels like I'm moving towards something. So that was a very long answer to your question of like,
no, that's perfect.
That's basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And I feel like, you're doing it in a way too where it's like everything is building off everything else. And, that's not to say I don't want people to think I'm saying like playwright is on the step to screenwriting. Like it's all different for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it was like, you started with acting and then it got into the playwriting and then it got into the screenwriting. And then it's like it keeps building on
Mm-hmm.
itself, which is like, I think that in film, in theater, in all of it, in any like creative, performative part of a career, it's like you've got to find the little things that like lead you to the next thing. Because the more you master, the more you're able to do for yourself and the more you understand the rest of it. So even if realize like, oh, I have no desire to write for live theater anymore, but I learned like the structure of writing from that. It's like you're always going to get something out of everything you try. So I feel like building upon itself is the way to go, no matter how you do it. So that's really cool that you got to do that. And like, do you think that you would have made that next leap were it not for like the world shutting down?
It's hard to say. Like, I
Yeah.
love to, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'd love to think that I would have always ended up here, but I really do think that everything happened the way it was supposed to happen and that I
Hmm.
came here at the right time. Um, it's funny because it's not that I don't ever want to write for theater again. I think I've just sort of put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
But like, there's I actually was supposed to have a play going up in LA, March of 2020, because it was I don't know if you've ever heard of Ink Fest. It's like this big
No.
sort of like 10-minute and full length or one act play festival that happens in the summer,
Okay.
or the spring, I guess. And I actually used the flight credit from that trip that I was supposed to come over here and see the play to like come and look at apartments later that year, because I just like
Nice.
that was like right when it was all shutting down. So I would love to like produce theater again. And the project I was actually working on right before, like in 2020, 2019, was I was working on it for like 2 years. And I'm very upset about it, but it's an immersive play about the service industry that takes place in a restaurant. And
Okay.
so like it's just one of those things that like it's the worst possible thing that I could have been working on before COVID, because then it was like, oh, these are the two big industries that you just don't have anymore.
Yeah.
But I every time I pitch that project to people, they're like, what? That's dope. Like, tell me more. And like two of my favorite collaborators, who are one's based in New York too. So we've
Mhm.
been like sort of working on it slowly for 2 years together. But it's something like that. It's like I would love to pick that back up again when the time is right.
Yeah.
Or it's all, but yeah, like you say, it all builds on itself, and it's all, I think, the same basic skill set, and you just have to like learn how to translate it. Like, I think one of the things that was really interesting transitioning from playwriting to screenwriting is just the use of dialogue. And like in a play, like it doesn't exist if it's not in the dialogue. Like the characters have
Yeah.
to say it, because otherwise the director can make a different choice, like if you just put it in the stage directions. But in screenwriting, it's like, how little dialogue can you get away with and still tell this story? And like what can you establish visually, and what can the character be doing that tells
Right.
straight, as opposed to them saying it. And so like, it's my favorite part about writing a script is the dialogue and like the scene work. And so usually like the brainstorming and outline is just a way for me to finally get to that like the dialogue writing phase. And so I think when I first started out writing pilots, it was a lot of just big long like scenes that were not beat out emotionally in any way. And my professors were like, Olivia, yeah, like you can just say like, you like, what is this line about? And I was like, I don't know, the actor will figure it out. And they were like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that was tough for Carolina and I because we're both like we grew up doing live theater for years and years before we moved out here. So um it's the same thing. It's like we're so used to writing for the stage, for dialogue, for all of that, like putting it out there, and it's always like the subtext is the most interesting thing. And I mean, that's true for live theater in a way, like that the subtext, it's what's underneath the lines, but it's like you
Mm,
still have to say the lines versus on camera, it's like you can literally just be looking at somebody's face and they're not saying anything and you're getting it all, because you get those things like the close ups and whatever. So yeah, that was a very difficult for transition for us as well. And I think that a problem that we've run into with that is like we're working on our first feature right now. When we were first doing the first draft, it's like, okay, this is not like quite enough pages. Like it's probably not maybe going to be quite feature length. And we're like, but there's action in here. Like, it doesn't translate the same way because it's not dialogue for every page. And,
Mm,
people that were reading it are like, well, yes, but no, but so that was a
mhm.
difficult concept for us to kind of get used to for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else do you find like that big differences are that you've struggled with between like writing for the theater versus writing for the camera? Or really good things, but I guess just differences in general.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is just like forgetting that I have to think about cameras. I was just talking with some writers yesterday. I was at this mixer in North
Mhm.
Hollywood, and just talking about like what it would mean to produce a short and like because I've produced theater in the past too. So my brain is like, all right, well, we need like a location and we'd need
Right.
like 3 actors and some background. We need a director and I'll act in it and like all this stuff. And then it's like, oh, but I also needed like a DP and like
Yeah.
sound, like all of this, like that stuff I don't like, I'm not used to thinking about. But I do think some of it is, and it's also like freeing, but limiting at the same time when I think like some of the short plays that I've written, like one has like a shark attack in it, someone gets set on fire. And it's like, even though those don't seem like I sort of wrote them to be unproducible because
Uh-huh.
I would just wanted to like, it was either like a writing prompt or it's just something where it's like, well, this would be like, this would just happen. Like this, what an outlandish thing to happen in a script. And then it's like that because I think that it's more like freeing in terms of my imagination, then I think that resonates with people. And like those are the plays that have gotten produced more because it's just like, oh, this is not something I've seen. And like good directors can accomplish that with like a sound effect. Like it's just lights and
Mhm.
sound in theater. So like I'm so used to just being like, we just need 2 black boxes and a curtain to do
Yeah.
the show. But and so I did last summer, sort of when I was still like looking for work, I did like a random week of background,
Mhm.
and that was like the first time I'd ever been on a TV set. And it was so cool. It was just so cool to just be there and understand like, I didn't understand what anybody was doing, but just like looking around to see like how it's made and like who
Yeah.
all is working on it and what needs to happen to like get this shot and like how they um shoot things and just even like and I ended up actually working in production after that in health and safety
Okay.
because no one wants to do that job. And even just like thinking about like somebody's in charge of like building the fake tree that is behind the character's window in the fake house that like nobody thinks about or nobody sees
Mhm.
when you're like watching it, or like that they have to pay background actors to like drive their cars to park in a fake street and like walk behind
Yeah.
them. Like no, it's no one's like thinking about that watching the show, but it's like that is like someone considering it and like what kind of tree is it and like what is this background person wearing. Like it's so much detail and thought that goes into it. So it's like I'm not at all used to thinking about that kind of stuff in terms of production. I think mostly not in totally in terms of like creativity, but it is different when you think about like, oh, like I just sort of and I do still hold that like if a work of art moves people and if a producer sees something and is like, this resonates with me, like I'm gonna get this made, like I don't like I think there's a fine line between like writing considering budget and producibility
Mhm.
and then writing because even when in theater, like people would always say like, oh, you should write a two-hander because it's so easy and cheap to produce. But then it's like, if you just write something to be easy to produce, then you're just writing a paint by numbers. You're not really like you're writing something that is still like moves you and like you have a purpose for
Yeah.
doing this. So on the one hand, I'm like, if I think that like producers find a way to make things that they want to make and
Mhm.
like but also you do have to I think there's a lot of negotiation that happens in terms of like producibility. But yeah, it's a lot
Yeah.
like again I think it's the same like basic skill set and like the same um like collaborative tools but
Mhm.
applied in different ways with different considerations.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It is such a big difference between like with theater, it's kind of all the suspension of disbelief, right? Like you said,
Right.
it's like you can put on a whole show with like two black boxes and the audience is they're gonna choose to believe that that's whatever you need it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Versus film, it's like you really can't get away with that, which is why? It's so
Yeah.
strange that it has to be so different, but that also goes to show kind of the value of like everybody on a set. It's like you have those people to think about all those little things. You know, you've got your production designer and your set decks and all this stuff to do all of those different jobs, which is kind of like I wish that we had more of that in theater. I wish there was more money for theater in general to be able to do
Mhm.
all those kind of things, you know, because you do see the then really big productions that do have budgets behind them, you know, on Broadway and all that kind of stuff, where it's like all the little intricacies and what you can actually accomplish on a live stage is sometimes incredible, you
Mhm.
know, especially like shows in the last 10 years. It's like there's always something even cooler than the last show that's, you know, they're putting on now. But all that to say, like, yeah, like you said, it's the same kind of skill set. It's still writing. It's still, you know, you've got to tell a story that affects people, but it's kind of the producibility, it sounds like, that's the biggest difference between the two.
Maybe. I don't know, that's
Yeah.
just the first thing that comes to mind, but
Yeah. Um, do you find, I guess, almost to play devil's advocate to what I just said, but do you find that like the structure, like certain amount of acts or, you know, however you follow the particular like writing structure, do you find that that is also the same, or does it seem because of like time constraints or anything like that, that that is affected on camera versus on the stage?
I mean, yes and no. I think it just depends on what your goal is with what you're
Okay.
writing. Because
Hmm.
honestly, like before I started learning about TV writing, like I was really interested in plays that were not well-made plays, like that were
Yeah.
like very experimental and like sort of like deliberately broke down structure and like
Hmm.
challenged like the traditional audience experience or like what you like want to get out of a play. Cause I was just like, especially in regional theater, you get a lot of like those kitchen sink, living room, like well-made plays,
Yeah.
which they are lovely and they have like a place and they accomplish what they want to accomplish. But that's just not the kind of theater that I was interested in making. And so I was trying to get away from that. So then when I started learning the screenwriting craft, part of me was like, it was so formulaic and it was very much like uh it was a good like on the other hand, like it's learning about it, it's very freeing. Like it was
Hmm.
almost like here's the structure. Like if you want to write as like a speck of This Is Us, like it's 6 acts. This is what happens
Yeah.
in act one. It was very much um like oh it was so like because I love structure. Like I love it when people give me the container and I can fill the container and like I
Yeah.
thrive with like predictability and stability. And so I was like, thank God, like someone just gave me the map, like how to do this. Like this is amazing. And then I can just like and I think like obviously there's too formulaic, and now everyone kind of says like you don't want your script to be paint by numbers, like you just wanted to like check off the boxes. Like
Hmm.
I think it's also like obviously like you have to like learn the tools to be able to like subvert the tools.
Right.
So it's like of course like I wanted to learn those structures when I started TV writing, and like it's just another way of like arming yourself with the knowledge of what am I going for, like what is not only what is like my length, like half hour or 1 hour, but also like what is the genre, like what is how are these formatted, and then like if I'm writing a sitcom, am I doing it single cam or multicam, is it like mockumentary, is it straight, um and so it's great to like to have all that stuff in your toolbox. But at the same time, like there was a part of me that really bristled against like but all movies don't have to be written like that, and like all TV doesn't like duh, like we should no we don't have to do this all the time, like
Yeah.
and but it is like I think with I think different formats like network versus streaming, like there's a lot of experimentation happening nowadays that wasn't seen before, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And people that are kind of breaking the rules when like no people keep saying you can't do that. So yeah, I think that it's like I have found like that structure to be very freeing and very like helped me kind of get a handle on the formats. But at the same time, I'm still very interested in like, okay, but also how can we like play with that to subvert like the audience's expectations?
Yeah. I mean, even things as simple as like episode length or amount of episodes in a season, like, you know, that's changed drastically now. And it's like, it used to be
Mhm.
like, okay, you've got, you know, 22 episodes, they're all half hour, or they're all an hour. And now it's like you might have 6 episodes in a limited series and they're not even all the same length in that one series, you know, which is, I mean, that's, it's a weird thing, I think, because like as an audience, if you're not also in the industry, you're just enjoying it, it's like you might not know these standards, but something still feels different. So it's almost, a subtle change in that sort of
Mm,
way. Yeah. But I think that's exciting for creatives because now, we get more opportunity to try different things. And
mm,
personally, even just as an audience, like trying to turn off my creator brain and just enjoy it, I like these like limited series. I like that it's, when somebody's like, "Oh, you should watch this show." And I'm like, "How many seasons is it?" And they're like, "Oh, it's been on for like 6 seasons." I'm like, "No, that's too much for me. Give me
yeah.
something that's 6 episodes. I'll strap in for that."
Mhm,
But I just think, yeah, it's really cool that there are so many different opportunities for creators now to do different things, on
mhm.
streaming and TV and all of that. So, but you said, so you came into it having TV in mind, but you would like to do shorts and stuff as well. So, where are you on that right now? I know you're still kind of new to this side of it, but
I mean, I like just finished a first draft of a short like last week.
okay, nice.
But yeah, it just sort of comes from like just wanting to collaborate with people and just wanting to
Hmm.
have projects. And like now that I do have a day job, like my energy is not taken up with like, okay, where's my like income coming from? Like, yes, like I was productive while I was unemployed. But then like I found the production job and I was less productive. And so it's kind of like my day job has to be in service of my ultimate goal. Like I can't get
Yeah.
caught up in the minutia of like and it's very difficult, I think, to be able to make money doing this like as I'm like getting traction and like even in theater, that's part of the one of the reasons why I was like maybe this isn't sustainable is because even when you're successful in theater, even when you're like a produced playwright, like if you're Tony Kushner, like you may not be making a living like
Yeah.
doing it just because it doesn't pay that much. And so um it's just it came from this impulse of just wanting to feel like for myself this is my career, like this is when I leave work I am going and like being a creative and I am making things that like are trying to move people and like projects that like really give me joy. And so I'd love to be able to do that like and only but until that happens, it's just like I need to think of myself as an
Yeah.
artist. I need to just do the work of being an artist, as you know. um, and yeah, and so it's like I loved writing 10-minute plays. Like that's when you're a playwright, a lot of people say like that's a good way to just kind of like start getting productions and start making
Mhm.
connections, because every time you get a short play produced, like that's a new theater, that's a new director you have a connection with, and it's easier to get a short play produced because theater's always doing festivals and like they're much cheaper and less risky to do.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get your name out there. So I wrote some shorts for a while, and like a few of them got like produced in DC or like around the country. And it's so I just love it. It's like you have a deliverable in a shorter amount of time, and it's just like I know the format of a 10-minute play. Like here's like first page, inciting incident, then you got the rising action, you got some twists, you got the climax, and like one page denouement. It's like very
Yeah.
like just like again, I love the container. I love filling the container. And so with a short, it was like, I think I want to like capture this energy again. Like it won't take as much time to like go through the whole process of writing a new pilot and like world building. It's like this is a complete world in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then like once I sort of get that, like get a good draft out, then I can focus on like, okay, what would it take to actually make this? Who would be the best director? Like who can I collaborate with? How can I pull all my friends
Right.
into this great project? Um, so that yeah, that's just kind of, and like I'm also continuing to write more pilots, and sort of like I started out in hour drama, but then I turned one of my hour-long dramedies into a half-hour comedy, and then I loved half-hour comedy, and so now I'm like maybe I'll do more of that. So I'm still kind of landing on like what my niche is as well, like sort of like
Mhm.
how I like pitch myself as a writer and like what I write about and like what I'm good at. But I think that's also like I don't want to pigeonhole myself too early in the sense of
Yeah.
like I don't want to just be like, well, I'm not a comedy writer. Like I'm only ever going to do drama, but then like never try comedy. So I want to like kind of dabble for a bit and then see what feels right.
Yeah. And I think that's smart too. And I think that, like that you're not limiting yourself, which is not only like smart, because who knows what you could end up being amazing at that you didn't even know, but it's also fun. It's like you get to then really enjoy it and immerse yourself in it. And you're not just like, the thing about being an artist is, if you're pursuing that as a career, it's like, yes, this is your passion, this is what you love to do, but it becomes work,
Mhm.
sometimes. And sometimes it just feels like work too and not fun. And you have to stop and remind yourself, I'm doing this because I love it. So
Yeah,
I think the more you get to, or I should say, the less you limit yourself, the more you get to play, it makes it more fun. It reminds you they're doing this because you love it.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's great too that um you're playing with 10-minute shorts for the stage. You're playing with like short films. You're playing with all of these things that again allow you more opportunity, because like, for instance, making a feature, like, no matter how cheaply you do it, it's so much work,
Mhm.
so much goes into it. Making a 2-hour play, again, it's like you can do these things for low budget, which everybody thinks is like the hardest thing is the money. And it can be sometimes, but sometimes it is just the work that goes into it. So, and that's not to say that shorts aren't a lot of work,
Mhm. Right.
but I think again, that allows you a lot more opportunity. And for those listening that aren't based in LA, the theater scene here is like, it's I feel like when I first got here, I was like, there is no theater scene. Like, what do you? Because I again grew up on theater. I was like, what do actors do out here when they want to do like a stage show? Like, what? I don't understand. And I came to find that it is here and it is thriving, but it's different than I expected. I think I expected like a New York City kind of scene, and I wasn't expecting Broadway necessarily, but while there are a lot of professional theaters in LA, a lot of it is just smaller, and I don't want to call them community theaters because it's more than that, but
Mhm.
they're very small. You don't hear about a lot of shows. Some of them are just company only, so you have to be like in it paying the dues to be a part of it. Some of it is totally community theater, but I feel like they all kind of come together when it's like festival time, and which
Mhm.
is amazing that they have the theater festivals out here. But yeah, that's kind of my favorite time of the year, is when like the fringe festival's going on and I get to see and hear about all of these shows that everybody's putting on. And it gives actors and writers and directors an opportunity to put up their work that they wouldn't necessarily have, because it's expensive again to rent a theater to put on a show.
Mhm.
And you always see those like movies about people moving to LA or moving to New York and putting on their one woman show and nobody's in the audience. Like,
Yeah.
it's tough to get people to go see shows, but
Yep.
I do feel that thankfully it's coming back now that, the world is opening back up year after year slowly, but
Mhm.
that's refreshing to see. And I
Yeah.
think that it's going to be kind of I don't want to say restructuring, but like resurgence. And I think we're going to see a lot more experimental theater, especially. Um, but just, to bring people back in and to get people to want to see shows. Like, people want to see new, exciting things. Hey, fam, have you heard us raving about Jambox yet? Because let me tell you, it's such an amazing tool for filmmakers, podcasters, advertisers, and anyone who needs music for their projects.
Jambox.io is so versatile. They've got songs and sound effects, organized by artist, genre, mood, and tags.
And they're actually affordable. For as little as $9.99 a month for independent creators, $6 a month for students, or $19.99 a song, you can choose whether a subscription-based membership or a la carte pricing works better for you. And they're flexible. For individual creators to commercial to advertising to theatrical release, they've got you covered.
Plus, they're constantly growing and evolving, with new songs and playlists all the time and customer service on point. They really do have everything you need.
We've been working with them for a while now and couldn't be happier. That's why we have a special coupon code for our listeners.
For 10% off your purchase, make sure you enter code FEMME10 at checkout. That's Femme, Femme, 10 at jambox.io, where they connect creators with ridiculously good music and sound effects.
which your show that you said that you were talking about earlier that's deals with the service industry and is immersive. I'd love to hear more about that, because I think that's a perfect example of like anything immersive. I always think is exciting, because it's not a new concept, but I think it's new to a lot of people, and it's just such a cool experience to be an audience member in an immersive show. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. Me too, to be honest. It's still in the works. But no, it's interesting when you talked about just like having people come out to see your play. Like that's one of the reasons that I think was really interested in television, because of that accessibility factor. And on the one hand, like, yes, there's nothing like live theater. Like that feedback between the actor and the audience that happens is like one of the most magical things, and it's not like nothing else. But at the same time, I do feel like there is a real barrier in terms of accessibility with theater, because like you do have to go like to a specific place at a specific time and often pay money to like to be there. And I would always get friends, like when I have plays produced, they'd be like, oh man, I'm so sorry that I wasn't able, because also sometimes like, you know, they don't live in DC, like that's where my play was. And so like they wouldn't get to see it, or if they had a chance to see it, but they couldn't make it, they'd be like, but I'd love to read the script. And I'd be like, no, like you had to see it. The script is just 50% of the thing. Like, I'm so mad. I wasn't mad. But with TV, it's like it's much more like accessible to people, and like you can watch it on your own time. When I actually random sidebar, but like one of my full-length plays actually like got produced a few times during lockdown, because it was a lot of theater companies or producers were looking to make virtual productions that they could like stream. And so, and I had a play, it's actually called Loneliness Was a Pandemic, but I wrote it in 2019. So it's not about COVID, it's about robots. But that was like, I think a good, it was adjustable to an online format, because it was a small cast. There's a lot of opportunities for like video in it. So people could like rehearse it and then like put it up and just sort of like do it's a one act, so they could do like one take or like stream it or video edit it. And so then that was like the first time where I was like, oh my gosh, like I have a play getting produced, but I can like tell my friends in New York, and I can tell my friends in California, and like they can all watch it, and like they can even watch the recording later on their own time, like not like. And so that was also like a really cool, freeing feeling. And so I think, so to take it back to immersive theater, like that's, I think, why I was way more interested in that kind of stuff, because it's asking why this play has to be live. Like, why is this a play and not a movie? Because now we can do realism really well on film and TV. So if it's theater, like how can that feedback really be capitalized on? And like, how can that magic, I think, like pull the audience in more? So which I think is still present in a lot of theater, but there were some really great immersive shows happening in DC that were inspiring. And like Woolly Mammoth is like sort of pushes the envelope a lot with like how they produce plays. So I got to see a lot of that firsthand when I was working there. Nice. So this one, when my collaborators and I were making it, we ended up going to like Sleep No More in New York. And oh no, there was one about Alice in Wonderland that I'm forgetting. It's Through the Looking Glass or something like that. But it was another one where like you basically just sort of like get free roam to explore these rooms, and like there are sort of events that are happening at certain times, like throughout it's usually like a big warehouse or like a mansion. You just like going into rooms, and so you can see those events, but nobody's telling you when and where they're happening, so you just have to stumble on stuff. And event, like you may get like pulled into a one-on-one with an actor and have like your own personal experience that nobody else got that whole time. And so we kind of wanted to do a hybrid of that, where like the play was called In Service, and it was sort of about this sort of transactional relationship that happens when you have like a customer and a server, and like what happens to your like humanity in for lack of a better word in that interaction, because you are like on the one, like yes, like it is like transactional, like the server is there to do a job, but also like that is like they have needs as well, and like they're people, and like you need to acknowledge like from both sides, like you need to acknowledge where the other person is coming from, and like how do you take care of someone in that moment as well. And so it would be the sort of like 2-tier ticket system where like you could buy a ticket to be a guest and you would sit at a table in this restaurant and like very low participation. Like you basically would order off the menu. The servers would be the actors.
Mhm.
And then there would be events that would happen in the restaurant that you could witness and you would see a full play happen. And like you would have different interactions based off of like who was your server versus who was the next table server. So you still wouldn't have like just one experience of this play. But then if you really wanted to like have an adventure, like you could buy a ticket to be a trainee, and you would like shadow a server, and then you get pulled into more one-on-ones. You get specific like directions, and like you'd still be like guided through the thing, like and taken care of, but it would be a lot more like participatory and like because some people like it's like, you know, I'd want it to be accessible for people that like really are not into immersive theater and they just want to watch a play, and also people that are like down, like they want to like be in it, they want to be doing all the stuff, they love escape rooms, those people. And yeah, so that was like exciting to me because I felt like it was something that it had to be a piece of theater. And so I would love, and like I said, every time I like tell someone like, oh, that was the project, that was like my like pre-pandemic, like fuck me, right? Like if I could like sort of like just like produce that at some point in LA, or like get like go produce it back in DC, I would love to, because I think that like it's but it's also like it was hard, like I think that still exists in like a Google file somewhere. Like it's very like you can't really have a script for it. It's more of like a grid of like which scenes are happening at what times with which people, and like how does this arc connect to this arc. But I also feel like having TV writing training since then, I think that's like, it would be very helpful to revisit that script now, because like in television, there's so much of like tracking those character arcs like through multiple episodes, and like how do they join. So I like I said, I have not given up on theater, like I haven't like left it all behind. It's just kind of been on the back burner, but yeah. Love to return.
Yeah. And this sounds like such a fun experience too, because you also have the opportunity, like, you know, if you love theater, you'll go see a show a bunch of times. It doesn't matter. If you're, you know, new to theater or you're not as into it or whatever, you might see a show once and be like, good, I'm good for life. It was a great show, but I don't need to see it again because I know what happens, you know, versus like an experience like this. It's like, you could be like a customer, quote unquote, or you can be a trainee and have those totally different experiences. You can do the same level, like just be a customer multiple times and you're a different table with a different server, and it's like you're still having a different experience. So I think that that's really cool, and that offers a lot for more people like that, again, aren't as already into theater. You know, this gives them a chance to see a different way to put on a show. And it just sounds super fun. Like I'm that person that's like, I want to be a part of it. Like throw me in there, coach, you know? So I think that's really cool that you offer that for people. And I've also been a server for 10 years. So I'm like, this is such a cool concept for me.
Oh yeah. Like I was a server for like one summer in high school, and I was a barista for a little bit after I graduated college. But it's, like one of my collaborators was like a career server, like full-time server, and like so many people that I know like have either like, I don't trust people, to be honest, that have not worked in the service industry. I'm just like, you don't understand like a core fact about life if you have not been on the other side of that.
Yeah, at least some sort of customer service, whether it's like, you know, retail or whatever. I mean, we've all got similar stories, similar issues, but
yes, absolutely. It's all connected.
Yeah. And I think it's like you were saying before, it's like, you know, you got to know the rules to break them kind of thing. It's like if you start, you know, writing this structured story in the way that you think you're going to write it, and by way, I mean, like, you know, you think it's going to be a short, but then it comes out and you're like, oh my God, wait, actually, this is way more. This is, you know, like that happens. That's the creative process, right? Like,
yeah. So true. So true. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I also like I'm excited to be on this podcast and talking to you, because I feel like you're also people that are just like, let me make stuff happen that like is fun and collaborative, and like is the stuff that like we would want to work on as actors. Because we're not like, you know, like I think being an artist in general is just, it's like half putting yourself out there, half applying for stuff, half asking for people to give you things and like jobs, and then half just like making your own stuff. And like my old drama lit professor in college would say that like, you can't ask for the like to sit at the cool kids table. You have to make your own cool thing. And eventually the cool kids look over like, hey, what do you have over there? Like you should like come sit over here.
Yeah.
That's how it happens.
100%. And I mean, like, that's why we started our production company, because we had met in an acting class and we were both pursuing, I hate saying just acting, but I mean like only acting,
Sure.
not just.
Yeah.
But, you know, we wanted to be in period pieces and we just weren't even getting those auditions. And it's like, you know, as an actor, I can accept not booking auditions, but I need to get the auditions. And I wasn't even getting those auditions, you know? So we were like, okay, we got to just create our own stuff. And so we just started from there and then fell fully into filmmaking. And it wasn't just like, you know, let's make something that we can be in to like put in our reel. It's like, no, let's make a real goddamn movie. Like, let's go all in, you know? So, and we still create these films for us to be in, like we're still on that track, you know? So yeah, it's just, you really have to figure out what you want to create, you know, and just jump in and do it. And I think for us, you know, our first thing that we ever did was a Western, which was like taking on way more than we could handle, but we pulled it off because we didn't even know, like we didn't know how crazy that was. So sometimes really just jumping in is the best thing to do.
Totally.
Yeah. I think too, like we talk about this all the time on the show. It's like, you know, how we were saying with your journey, like building upon itself. It's like the more things you try, the more you realize what you're good at and what you're not good at, but what all goes into it too, you know? And I think that goes with storytelling, that goes with like the actual jobs of production, like that goes to say for genre, everything. It's like try as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then you'll find what you love and you'll find what you're good at.
I totally agree.
Yes, girls. Hello. Good morning.
Yeah, and I think like you said, like you just learn like sometimes learning what the thing is not is just as valuable as learning what the thing is.
Yeah.
And like I think that like even if you try something and you're like, I hated this and I want to do this again, like this was terrible, then it's like, okay, well now that's like something that I've learned about myself. And like, or if you've collaborated with someone, you're like, I know this person's very good at that. And like, I know that we work well together, or maybe we don't, maybe we're really good friends, but we don't work well together. And so that's also something to know. So yeah, it's just like, and I think like I go back and forth between like the second I have a draft of something that I like am kind of excited about, I'm like, look, I made a thing. And I'll like email my friends to be like, look at this script or the short. And they'll be like, oh, this is okay. Like this is the first draft. Very cool. And so like but also like, there are times that I kept saying like, oh, I don't want to like show like this pilot is like been through 12 drafts, but it's, I wouldn't show this to like, a producer or anything like that. And like my fellow writers sometimes are like, no, like you just eventually like you just making it different. You're not making it better. You just like, you can't wait for it to be perfect before you share it, because like, it's always going to change. And like, it's always a collaboration. So it is kind of finding that balance, I think, between like, like I just need to steam ahead, but also like, let me make sure that I'm purposeful about why I'm doing this and that I'm like ready as I can be.
Absolutely. I mean, like, again, like I said, we're working on our first feature right now, and it's like we keep just draft after draft after draft, and we've gotten to a point where we're like, okay, let's quote unquote lock it in right now, as in like we're not going to take the time to stop and do rewrites anymore. We're going to move ahead with everything else, but knowing that things are going to change. Things are going to change on the shoot days, you know, things are going to change when we connect or like hire other people in our core crew. Like things are going to constantly be changing, but we're going to take this as that working draft, that we're not just going to like be taking time to write anymore. Like, you know, so it's like, this is the final draft, but not really the final draft, but like close enough to the final draft that we can move ahead. And knowing when you're at that point with your work, it's difficult because, you know, you want it to be perfect, but again, it's like, it's never going to be locked in until it is already shot. And even then it's like editing could change things too. So
Oh, that's another thing I first forget about coming from theater is post. Oh, right.
And like a whole story can be changed in post. It is, it's insane because I like personally I don't have like an editor mind. Like I'll see, raw footage and then I'll see how different it turns out. And like literally just cutting from one person to the other can like change the whole mood of a scene. And it's just, it blows my mind. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. And like, is it, as a writer specifically, like, is that something that is a world that's exciting to you, or are you also like, I can't like process that, or does it feel almost like it's changing your story? Like how, I guess, how do you feel about that world, like coming from, again, stage where it's like what is performed is the story versus film where it can totally change in post?
I mean, I will say I'm like the least tech savvy millennial. And so the like nuts and bolts of post and editing is like 0% exciting to me. But I mean, I think it's, again, like we were talking about, like the same kind of muscles with collaboration that happen in theater. Like I've worked on plays with directors who were like totally picking up what I was putting down and like executed like the vision that I had on the page, and like we were on the same page. And then I've had like plays where I really felt like I was clear about what this moment was, and the director did not think that it was the same thing. And so like then the play kind of like was wonky because it was staged in a different way. And so I was like, I don't know where this miscommunication is happening. So I feel like with post, it's like actually people have asked me, like when I talk about wanting to produce a short, they say like, oh, well, you should direct it too, because like that's like the director gets all the credit anyway, and like you should like wouldn't you like to like execute like what you see? And I'm like, no. like directing sounds so like managerial to me, and it's like I would love to collaborate with a very good director that I like trusted, that also like, because I've never like done film before, so watching someone else like set up the shots and like direct like the actors, and then also like maybe like watching a great like editor like handle the scenes in post, like I'd want to still be available for those things and like have a voice, but I also like, I think that I don't really want to do everything myself. I think that I would love to do like a Rachel Bloom thing or an Issa Rae thing and just like act in something that I wrote, like write a role for myself. That's very appealing to me. But yeah, I think that like, especially starting off, like I think it's more appealing to me to like find people who know what they're talking about and are really good at it, and then just like learn from them. And it's a process. Like if the first thing that happens, it's like, okay, I wrote this, but I wasn't, and maybe it wasn't totally how I would have done it by the end product because I didn't direct it myself or edit it myself. But then that's still like a collaborative venture that happened. And then the next time I do it, it's like, maybe I would try doing this. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I like that because that's how I think too. It's like the more people you have involved, like sometimes it can be overwhelming. Sometimes it's like too many cooks in the kitchen, but more often than not, I feel like they're just going to bring more ideas to the table that maybe you didn't even think of. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. That's even better. That takes it to the next level, and it's so good to have that collaborative mindset, because another thing is even if it's not like new ideas you didn't think of, they also might pick up things that you missed, that, you intended in the writing. And then when it came to actually shooting it or performing it, it gets missed because so much is going on,
Or they like have better ideas than me. Like sometimes I want to collaborate with people. Like I was a theater arts major in college. And so my senior thesis was writing a play, but then I had to like partner with other seniors to like direct and act in it. And like one of my favorite like phrases we always batted around was like theater, it's like the end product is like greater than the sum of its parts. It's better than we each could have made it individually because we all were working on it. And like one half formed thought joins another half formed thought. So like with like the short that I would like to work on, like there are sort of ways that like it's like I have an idea of how to accomplish this like effect or like this sort of but I won't say my idea yet, but but like how like I have a way that I would maybe stage this, but I also would like to like hear other ideas or like hear like especially from people who are like used to visual storytelling and like how would someone else accomplish this? And it's like, well, maybe that's like something brilliant that I would never have thought of, and like you know what, they should take the credit for that. Like like we can all like join forces on this together.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Olivia, thank you so much. And listeners, like, if you want to collaborate, call your girl.
Oh, I'm always down for a coffee date.
Love
Always
that.
reach out.
Yeah. And then on that note, will you tell our listeners where they can find you and find your work and connect with you?
Absolutely. So all of my handles are basically just my name, very boring. So you can find, I have a website, it's oliviahaller.net. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Olivia_Haller. Yeah, it should be pretty easy to find me, I hope.
Perfect. I mean, you say it's boring, but I say that's way easier to remember. So
Good.
I think you chose the smart route. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Livia, for coming on today. This was great. I love hearing like the different aspects of like, TV versus film versus stage versus like, because it's so different, but it's so similar in so many different ways. So it's really cool to get to hear that from someone that's done it all at this point,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important to like learn everyone's process. I mean, you were mentioning editing earlier. Learn just some basic editing. I've gotten to do like more of the editing for us too. And like honestly, it's helped me become a better actor because I know what the
Mm-hmm.
director is looking for. And that's also why I believe that I can do some directing for us, right, Tessa? It's just like I've been able to like really like have that. And it's not everyone's like cup of tea or skill, but just like learning anything, like
Mm-hmm.
just the fundamentals, I think helps you become a better writer and actor, director. So I love that. I think it's really important for our listeners who aren't even writers to understand like what's going on through your mind. So thank you for coming on and sharing all of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Absolutely.
Oh,
I'm so glad that we got
yes.
connected with you. This is great.
Thanks for listening to Femme Regard Podcast. If you like what you hear, tune in every Friday for more tips on the filmmaking business and insightful conversations with industry professionals.
We can only grow with your support, so please subscribe, share, rate, and review.
You can also join the Femme Fam on Patreon.
For more on us, check us out at femregard.com.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.